8th graders, we're here with lesson 5-2 on estimating with percents. The first type of example you might see will say to use decimals to estimate 28% of 191. So my first step is to change 28% to a decimal that is easy to work with. So I'm going to take the 28, which is what this would be 0.28, and I'm going to round it to just 0.3. And then I'm going to use that number to find a compatible number close to 191 that is easy to multiply by. So I went up to 200. And then my last step is to figure out what is 0.3 times 200, and I figured out that that is 60. So my answer is 60, is my estimation about 60. All right, go ahead and try to follow those same steps on this example on your own. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to round 18% to a one-digit decimal, easy to work with. So you either would go down to 1 or up to 2. What are you supposed to do when you're rounding? Okay, and then for this one, now after I picked what I'm using there, I'm going to round this number to a number that's compatible, that's easy to multiply this number by. And then after you do that, you're going to multiply those two numbers, and that'll be your answer. The next thing we need to talk about are these fractions as percents. I would like you to memorize this list. You've already memorized that 1/2 is 50%, and 1/4 is 25%, and 3/4 is 75%. Now you're going to memorize the thirds and the eighths. If you the thing that's great about this is it translates into memorizing them as decimals, which is so very useful. So these two especially, I use them all the time. 1/3 is the same thing as 33 1/3%, which as a decimal is 0.3 repeating. You should know that in 7th and 8th grade. You should know that 1/3 equals 0.3 repeating. So memorize it now. Take some time. It'll save you hours of time. If you add up all the time, you'll be calculating that in the future. 2/3 equals 66 2/3%, or 0.6 repeating as a decimal. Notice that 2/3 is just double that. So if you remember 33, it's easy to remember 63. Okay? Now, the eighths are a little bit more tricky to remember, but start here. 1/8 is 12.5%, which is 0.125. 3/8 is 37.5%, which is 0.375. 5/8 is 62.5%, which as a decimal is 0.625. And 7/8 is 87.5%, which as a decimal is 0.875. Please take some time to memorize those. We're going to use that in our next type of example. Okay, so this question says, use fractions to estimate. A disc jockey says that about 65% of his 238 CDs are pop albums. Estimate the number of pop albums. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look for what percent is close to 65. That was one of those ones we memorized that we know a fraction for. And I came up with 66 2/3 is the closest one. And so what is that as a fraction? 66 2/3% is the same thing as 2/3. So I'm going to write it in here. I found a fraction close to 65%. The next thing I have to do is find a number close to 238 that easily divides by 3. Okay, and that's because we're going to be dividing by 3 when we break this into groups. So I use my little trick of adding the digits up to figure out what is divisible by 3, to figure out that 240 is divisible by 3, because 2 plus 4 is 6, and 6 is divisible by 3. So now my last step is to multiply. So I am going to multiply 2/3 times 240 over 1. I crossed out things that can go into both. So 3 can go into 3 once. It can go into 240 80 times. and then I multiplied across to get 160. I also could have done, as you did in Saxon, what is 2/3 of 240? I would divide by 3 and multiply by 2, which is also 160. All right, now the last type of problem that this lesson has is estimating a 15% tip of a number. So the way that we're going to do this is first we're going to round 2885 to an easy number to work with. So I'm going to round it up to $30. And now I'm going to estimate what 10% of $30 would be by just moving my decimal place 1 over. So 10% is about $3. And now I need to find what 5% is. So I'm going to do that by just cutting my 10% in half. So 5% is about $1.50. And my last step is just to add those things together. So $3 plus $1.50 is $4.50. And so 15% of 2885 is about $4.50. Go ahead and apply that same set of steps to this problem. Estimate a 15% tip of $72.10. All right, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow and what you guys came up with. Go ahead and get to work.